Naropa is part of my Sangha group. I have several Sanghas, but it's good to be back here and to see the continuity of contemplative education, and especially on the day when this is being celebrated in Practice Day. So I'm very delighted. When people used to ask me, what's so special about teaching at Naropa, I would say, at a university, all you have to do is give description. Tell people what the objective stuff is. At a seminary, you give prescription. You tell people what they should be doing. At Naropa, I can do both. Because, yes, there is the training and the teaching and everything that's necessary to learn and to know. And at the same time, there's also the formation of character. And this is really what I want to talk to you about today, because there is a paradigm shift in the way in which we have to look at who we are in relation to the planet. So in a way, I'm talking to the choir, I'm preaching to the choir. I don't have to tell you anything about the problems that the planet has with overpopulation, with overconsumption, with spoiling of the environment and so on and so forth. You all know that. But because it's Practice Day, and that means that the methodology of transformation that comes with consciousness is up to date. So I want to propose for you something that will make for a shift in the matrix of how we look at our personality. Let me go back for some time when I met with His Holiness the Dalai Lama in Vancouver, and I raised some questions at that point. What is the cosmology, the teaching about reality, that would allow for our planet to heal? Because if you look at all the ways of reality maps that we have today, none of them speaks to how to heal the planet. In other words, to listen to the voice of the planet rather than to listen to the voices of culture, of capitalism, and so on and so forth. Now, it's not going to be easy to change that point of view. That's necessary. Because when I was asking this question, what would be the arising cosmology that comes from Earth, from our mother, the Earth, from the planet? Then the next question would be, what are the ethics that come from such an understanding? Because right now, the ethics that we have are governed so much by the social universe, the political universe. The political universe is not tenable anymore because it's so anti-life. The cultural universe is governed by the media in the service of capitalism. The biological universe, the morphogenetic fields of different social and ethnic groups are in conflict with each other. And so the question is, how are we going to handle this birthing process that looks at this point as it is a great calamity? Could you imagine a young woman who had never heard of birth and who is now about to give birth and feels what's going on? She must be so upset and so worried. It feels like she's bursting and she's dying. And it is so good to know that in those meditations that you can have between contractions, to know, but this is for life, this is for good. There is something that's going to come from that that'll be wonderful. So, what have we learned? When Descartes was telling us about the universe, he saw it as a machine, as a clockwork. And that's not a good model. Freud was in the time of steam technology, so he was dealing with pressure and repressing and suppressing and drives and stuff of the sort, And that was because we always take from the environment what we are to think of. But it has turned out now that the model that best speaks about life on the planet is an organic model. In other words, organism is the way we have to understand things. So when we saw the planet from outer space for the first time, it became so clear that we have to start looking at Earth as a living being, and that all the constituents of that living being are cells of that living being. Now, since the time when ego became so important at the Renaissance, I am me, and that's the important part, and so on and so forth. So we saw the individual as being the highest possible thing. We didn't think that people could get a feel for other people. And so there was a song that went like this: Die Gedanken sind frei, wer kann sie erraten? Thoughts are free, no one can gather, can know them. But the truth of the matter is that when someone comes into the room and you can feel the vibe they bring into the room, we are, as Gene Houston likes to say, our margins are...
Oh, leaky margins.
We have leaky margins. I like to say this when someone asks me about these things. Yeah, okay. That I would be a very bad poker player. Because I can make all the faces in the world, and say, cards are lousy, but I'll say, he has a royal flush, Zalman has a royal flush. It's going to come on another level. And why is this so? Because we are connected differently than we have given ourselves the idea for. If you can imagine, if we could for a moment see all the waves that are going through here, from radio, television, cell phones, everything, if they could become visible, could you see how many ghosts would be flying around here? Now this is only with the technical stuff that has to do with electronics and so on. But if you start asking, what about the life forces that are there? When we bow in at the beginning, what is it that we are doing? We are saying to the group mind, we want to share this together, we want to be a whole being at this point, and we want to know with each other. And so that thing that has to do with, we don't have the good language for it. Take a look. I have active, I have passive, but I don't have an interactive. Thich Nhat Hanh wants to talk about interbeing, and he's right, When you think, I'm talking, but I'm not talking. I'm only talking because you're listening. If you were to, all of you, turn off and go somewhere else, after 2 minutes I would stop talking. I would feel I'm not doing anything. It's not between us. And so that's what Buber used to call das Zwischenmenschliche. That which happens between people wouldn't be there. But it's not only the Zwischenmenschliche. Nowadays, and Eve will be able to share more about that, emotions of animals. What has shamanism brought back to us? That you need to talk to stones, the stone people, and the tree people, and the four-leggeds, and the winged ones, and the fishes, and so on and so forth, all my relations. That thing that puts us on top of the scale has to be changed. We have to start thinking of ourselves as participants. Look how the academic world has spoiled it for us by saying, I want you to understand things objectively. So they gave us an epistemology. That is, this is how you understand those things outside of you. But the truth of the matter is, the only epistemology that works is a participatory epistemology. We are in this very same picture that we are trying to understand. And what would this mean? So in the spiritual life, it would mean that we would have to say, what am I connected with? What are the influences on me? And what am I being deployed for by Earth? Because it isn't that we can come and say, I have a plan for life. We have to say that life has a plan for us. And when we can say that, then the whole thing shifts. And I want to say that the spirituality of the past has been the enhancement of the individual a great deal. When I was here at Naropa, I spoke about a number of things. One was lineages and upheaval. Every religion has to be updated. Every religion has to be updated. Because religions have to fit the reality map that's current at this point. And if you still believe that Earth is in the center and the sun and the moon are turning around us, then you are living in a religion that is not current. And it's the same situation that had to do with the place of women in religion. And that is is changing right now. I don't know how long it'll take, but there are already some Roman Catholic women priests who are serving Mass, and they're doing this sub rosa, but it's happening because it needs to happen, because it is what is emerging. And it's not emerging because we are planning it, it's emerging because the pain of the planet is saying something has to be done. Could you imagine if you were to lie down one night and allow yourself to extend your feelers all the way over the planet? Could you find one place that isn't hurting? Go all over the planet and you'll find things are hurting. People are out of work. The earth is parched and thirsty. The air is polluted, and so on. So if you go into that place, then you feel a certain compassion for the earth that in the past, when we used to speak of that in the Kabbalah, we used to call it the exile of the divine presence. You know, it isn't showing, God isn't showing in this world so much. It's the exile of that, because people are not really dealing with the organismic presence that is there. So how do we go about changing that? What was so wonderful about the Buddha's teaching was, you can't do it alone, you have to be a member of a Sangha. I can't do it for you, you can't do it for me, but together we can do it in a way that what I don't have and you have, you can contribute, and we will make it together that way. So I like to say the only way to get it together is together. I can't get it together for you, and you can't get it together for me, but together we can get it together. So the question is more togethering. And that's the reason why I like to speak of socialized meditation. That is to say, not only do I put myself in a bubble and then want to be tight, you know, and now I'm going to meditate this way, but rather to be able to sit with another person, and both of you go inside and then share with each other what you find. And you will see that in this way, when there is a socialized form of living the inner, bringing the inner out, two things happen. The first thing is that it doesn't disappear right away, because look how many theophanies we have had in our life. If I had them all at this moment right now, would I be enlightened? Oof, yeah. but they disappear. And part of the reason why they disappear is because we are not sharing them, we are not making them as part of the cultural, how would I say, capital that we have. And so in order to be able to bring about the healing of the planet, it will be necessary to do the interdependence thing much, much stronger. And it means a change in language. Sometimes when I want to be really gross about it, I say we have an active, we have a passive, but we don't have a fuckive. You know what I mean?
They know what you mean. They know what you mean.
So that interactive thing has to happen, but it has to be also done in a larger scale. So that when you go back to see what were some of the liturgies that are necessary, you will see that liturgies were always there in order to help people to do it together. And I want to say that there is a hunger that we have, because the reptilian brain is always afraid that somebody is going to take something away from you. So you have to be well protected. But the limbic brain is like a puppy dog, wants to celebrate, it wants to do what did Whoopi Goldberg do with the sister act, right? Wants to do sister act, wants to really get excited about things. And together. And so what happens is that we have to pay attention to the ground on which we live. And that's sort of the last part that I want to say about liturgy. When the Buddha got enlightened, he was in India. The matrix of his thought, underlying his thought, was India. When the Bodhidharma took the Dharma into China, there was another matrix. The matrix was Taoism and Confucianism. And the flavor of that Buddhism shifted because it had another matrix there. When it came to Japan, it did the same thing. There was Shinto, and Shinto was the matrix by which celebrations of the year would happen and so on and so forth, and that gave the Japanese Buddhism its flavor. And Ben was the religion in Tibet, and that what gave Tibetan religion its flavor. So I asked His Holiness, isn't it time? There was a Theravada, there's a Hinayana, there's a Vajrayana. Isn't it time that there should be a fourth turning of the wheel? Because what has happened is that in truth, because of the Chinese and because of all that, the Buddhism of Tibet has come out into the world, and now how is it going to make it work here in America? Some of the things of eating sampa and drinking butter tea don't necessarily fit for America here. But then what is it that's necessary? So what's necessary is to start paying attention to the indigenous roots of this country. Because every religion needs to be able to integrate with the chthonic element that comes from earth in order to live in a proper relationship with the planet. When Eve and I were in Australia, And we realized that the people there were celebrating all the holidays according to the Northern Hemisphere. And we thought that this was absolutely foolish. The only people who were responding differently were the Wiccans. They had turned it around in such a way that they would celebrate the seasons when the seasons were there. Whereas the others were still the Northern Hemisphere. So the feeling of what we can learn from indigenous peoples here in order to see visions, in order to heal in nature, in order to collaborate, these are the things that are necessary to bring into the religions that we have from the past and into our consciousness. And that's what I'd like to share with you today, that there will be a reason for creating upaya, skillful means that will bring us to the place that we don't see ourselves locked in to our own ego, because that is the presentation of self that we have in order that we should be able to get on with life in the world, so people should recognize us. But I think that has to be dismantled in another kind of presentation of self as a participant within life of all beings on this planet is what's necessary. I think that's all I want to say.
Thank you. So, we come here with our plans of what we're going to say, and then Reb Zalman looks at all of you and something maybe entirely else comes up. And I listen to him and something entirely else comes up for me. So one of the things that I want to mention that comes out of what you were saying is that in our tradition, in the Jewish mystical tradition, as are in many other traditions as well, the idea that we coexist in four worlds. The most grounded physical being called the world of doing, Olam HaAsiya, the world in which physical things take place. The next world being the world of affect, the world in which the creation is out of emotion, out of desire. The third being the place in which creation comes out of the mind, out of mental activity. And the fourth, of course, being the interface with the much, much larger world, with the divine. And Reb Zalman has pointed out that in this society in particular, which has the chutzpah to say that it is a good thing to be a consumer. Now, when I think of the ultimate consumer, who remembers Jabba the Hutt? Is this a good thing? So we're being taught that we're supposed to consume it, that is the way we keep our economy going. We create wants for people that hopefully will turn into needs that other people will have to fulfill by taking from what is the natural environment and turning it into something that will be temporarily used and then turned into garbage which you can't dispose of. And furthermore, we are taught in all sorts of ways that are both overt and subtle that a need in any of the four worlds should find a way to fulfill itself in the concrete physical world. So if you are emotionally needy, there's something in the physical world that can fill that. If your mind doesn't have enough to chew on, maybe there's a piece of machinery or software that can help that, and so on. And of course, if you're in exile from your own spiritual life, there are all sorts of things you can gobble up to try and quell that pain. And right now, the Western world is completely in the grip of that fiction, and I sit here as a perfect example. You can tell from my girth that somewhere in me I deeply believe that a hunger in any of those four worlds can be solved by food. And I can also tell you it can't. Though the part of me that reaches for for something to eat does not really believe that. So on all sorts of levels that play with each other, we are all in the grip of that. This is echoing to me. Is it echoing to you too?
Yeah.
Can we do anything about that? Keep it up. Better? Thank you. Thanks very much. And of course, as we are modifying our earth in order to accommodate all these hungers and all these needs by producing things which we then must consume, we are paving over the natural world and therefore becoming more and more distanced from the multiple interconnecting rhythms that our earth has that could actually nourish us. When I was going to graduate school at Sonoma State in California, a great many of the students who were taking courses there were living in abandoned chicken coops and things like that, you know, wonderful tents on the corner of somebody's field, and were much more possibly in touch with natural rhythms. Is there anyone here who is living in an abandoned chicken coop? Oh well. How about in a good tent on a, no? Who here has a garden? Wonderful. How many of you are growing food? Getting better. Better? Oh, much better. Thank you. Thank you, thank you. Because from up here, we can't always tell how it sounds out there. Much appreciation. There's a group of middle-aged Dominican nuns in Blairstown, New Jersey, near Delaware Water Gap, who for, what, about 30 years have had a place that they call Genesis Farm. And they have managed somehow to officially keep out of the control of the local diocese. So there are no priests who can tell them what they must do. And what they've done is they are teaching straw bale housing, they're teaching organic gardening, and they are doing something like a 9-month course, I believe, in what they call earth literacy. You can find them on genesisfarm.org. And one of the things that they're doing are the seasonal celebrations. So at least when you open their literature, they sound like Wiccan nuns. But I assure you, they're practicing Catholic nuns, and they're just finding the ways to make this real and make this live. Who here is celebrating the Jewish holidays? Who here is aware of how very seasonal these are? More people that are celebrating, this is good. Get invited to some of those celebrations so that you don't only know it from the outside. The result of all this disorder is that we become progressively more distanced from the reality that keeps us alive at all. And we can't really tune into it. So we don't hear what that bird is saying. The other day, we kept hearing this marvelous, and it's a flicker drumming on our chimney. And we've just been thinking, you know, what an amazing thing to do. What neck muscles. What a statement. You know, here I am, big, potent flicker. Anybody interested? Because this is a mating announcement. Here I am, big, potent flicker. But most of us who are living in any city are fairly out of touch with a lot of this, and out of touch with how real nourishment can come to us from the planet on which we live, and that we naturally give back to. So what I'd like to do at this point is a short series of imaginal exercises. This is out of the tradition of my teacher, in Israel, Colette Abulkir Muscat. May she be having a very enlightened next life.
She isn't back yet.
Other life. She isn't back yet. She came from a deep Sephardi tradition, and her work with Imaginal Exercises does not resemble, who here has done, quote, guided imagery here? Oh, this is very bad. Because you're going to have to unlearn a method very quickly. Now, I remember this stuff. You have a nice long induction and you go following it, and at some point you sink into the soup. And you come out when you hear 3, 2, 1, open your eyes, and you cannot remember half of what went on. And this is not like that. I'm going to give you exercises that are very, very speedy. You need to get in and just move on. Get in and move right out. Take it quickly and just let yourself be directed to move. And it gives no induction practically. So you are not going to get awfully relaxed. That's fine. Just figure out a way to sit that you don't have to mess with yourself. The punctuation between segments is only going to have to do with breath. Plain, ordinary, normal breath. Whoever is willing to participate in this, get comfortable, uncross. If you're sitting in a chair, uncross your legs. If you're sitting on the floor, you may need to keep them crossed so you don't fall over. It helps if you uncross your hands, so all your circuits are open. Can you hear me okay now? Okay. Close your eyes and simply breathe out easily 3 times. And imagine that you are walking on a road next to a wall, wearing your armor. What is it made of? When you come to the gate in the wall, you'll find that it is locked, and the lock is of the same material as your armor. If you wish to enter the garden, you can open the lock by removing your armor and leaving it behind you. Breathe out and entering the garden, smell the scents, hear the sounds, and be following the sound of water until you come to a small pool of clear water. Breathe out and removing all of your clothing, all of your jewelry, contact lenses, false teeth, anything that isn't your own body. Be entering the water completely. Breathe out and dive for a moment looking under and see if there's anything on the bottom that is there for you, and come back up. If there is something for you, breathe out and dive down and retrieve it, bringing it back up with you. And leaving behind in the water everything that is not you. Coming out of the water, feel the air blow you dry. And look at what you've retrieved, holding it in your right hand. Breathe out and hold it in your left hand. What do you see? Breathe out and hold it in both hands. Breathe out and hold it to your heart. And if it is really for you, let it live there. Breathe out slowly and look and see if there's anywhere a clear garment for you to put on. And in your clear garment, be walking, feeling the ground under your feet very clearly until you find a tree that attracts you. Be standing with your back against the tree. Breathe out and sense little roots coming from your feet, growing down, following the roots of the tree at the same time that your head is growing up towards the crown of the tree. When your head is just a tiny bit higher than the crown of the tree, look all around you and sense and feel in your body how what the tree is breathing out, you are breathing in. And what you are breathing out, the tree is breathing in. Breathe out and very slowly and smoothly be coming back to your own size, coming down from the crown of the tree at the same time that the roots from your feet come up from deep in the ground. Until you are again your own size, with your feet firmly upon the ground. Breathe out and be sitting with your back against the tree, listening, hearing the sounds of the birds, of the bees, the rustling of the creatures in the bushes. And see that a very large and beautiful bee is flying near you. Breathe out and become the bee. Be exploring this garden of innocence as the bee. What is this like? And be coming back as the bee to that person sitting against the tree. Breathe out and become again yourself in your own body, bringing with you what you've learned from the bee. Breathe out and hear the crowing of a rooster, and see the rooster strutting nearby. Breathe out and become the rooster, strolling and experiencing this garden as a rooster. What do your rooster senses tell you that you haven't experienced before? Breathe out, and as the rooster comes closer to the tree, come back into your own body, bringing with you whatever you've learned. And sensing how your body understands it. Breathe out and see a little way off a very graceful, sinuous movement under a bush. What color is the snake that you see there? Breathe out and become this snake, moving with such grace on the ground. And if, as you move as a snake, you sense that your skin has become too tight, find a sharp rock and begin to move yourself against it until you move out of your old skin that no longer fits. When you come out of the old skin, what color are you and how do you feel? Bringing with you all that you've learned from sensing yourself as a snake, come back into your own body with all that you've learned and smell the fragrances of the garden. Be leaving the garden, bringing with you everything that you've learned and knowing that you can come back here. When you're outside the garden and have closed the gate behind you, becoming with everything you bring back into this room, sitting. Breathe out slowly 3 times. And open your eyes. It's tempting to linger, but do open your eyes. Now I'm going to ask you to do something more difficult than any of that. Turn to a partner and in the most brief way, narrate in the present tense what your experience is. I will call time in 2 minutes and then you can switch. So whoever was the teller becomes the listener. If you haven't already done that, take 2 more minutes to switch. So if you've been speaking, you're now here. Begin to wrap up. We promised that we would let you out in time for lunch.
You don't care. You'd rather stay here.
still a couple of things we'd like to be able to share with you before the thing is over. So, would you please
finish your present sentence?
Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you. Who here lives with animals where you're living here at home? Thank you. Can I see, who's got reptiles? Fishes? Cats? Dogs? Goats? Llamas? Of that kind, you know. Sheep. Cattle, okay. I would like to propose to those of you who have animals at home that you spend a short time, if you can every day, but at least once a week, asking what they have to teach you. Because if you ask them, they will tell you. You have to be ready for that.
Okay. It's so good to hear from Eve, so when Eve was telling you about the four worlds in which we are speaking Kabbalah, it's very close to what you will find in other systems too. In Sufism you have the same four worlds, and you will have places like Brahmaloka in Hinduism, and you have the same in Buddhism, and I can't remember those names because I'm getting old, but they're all there. What lives in them? Because most of the time we are thinking of there's the infinite, cosmos, the infinite, and then there are human beings and animals. And we don't ever think about the beings in between. It was wonderful in Findhorn when they were talking also about the little devas that were hanging out, growing the food. I think the shift that needs to happen can't happen without us becoming more aware of those beings that live in the in-between spaces, because it's not only them that live there, but it's also we. Give you an example. On the physical level, I'm sitting here in this chair, but on my energy level, I'm spreading myself energy-wise with this amplification, but to the ends of this room, so that I would be able to send my energy all the way to the people in the back too. When we were talking about something lovely or funny, then there was a welling up in us on the level of affect. And that was, we were much closer to a whole body when we were laughing about the same thing. We were becoming a sangha of a joke, if you will, but that was important. No, my feeling is that we don't have enough of that happening. Because look, we live in houses that you drive into your garage and you don't sit in the front porch anymore talking to neighbors and so on and so forth. We have become so fragmented that families don't live in the same place. We don't have grandparents and grandchildren live in the same, under the same roof, and so there isn't that which was family values that can only go from grandparent to grandchild, because the generation in the middle are your eatable enemies. You know? So you can learn from your enemy's enemy, which is a grandparent, much better. and we don't have that. So it's important from time to time to seek out some people who can be in local grandparentis, who can share with you certain things. But when you start asking, what are the shamans talking about? They're always talking about helpers and the spirit of plants and so on and so forth. And I have a feeling that our denial of that is what makes us more hungry than we are. Because we eat empty calories when we don't take the devas of the food along with our food. Does that make sense to you?
Yes.
So this has something to do with bringing blessing into the world. When consciousness enters into the food with thanksgiving to the people who produced it and to the animals that were involved in that, it makes such a difference because the nourishment goes better. It doesn't get thrown out so much. The other thing that's missing is celebrations. It's so important to create seasonal celebrations. Mardi Gras is such a situation. Soon we're going to have Purim with our masks and with all the fun things that we're doing on Purim. Passover will be coming and so on. So it would be a wonderful thing to find out. I understand also that Shambhala Day is on the way. And why do I have good memories of the things that we did on Shambhala Day? But there's the good, take a look what happened just now. That good feeling that rose up, you know? These are the endorphins that make for healing inside of us. They strengthen our immune system. And that's why it's so important to do more and more of that sharing and more of that blessing. So, we do something about assigning merit. There are people who are struggling in Tripoli and in Madison, Wisconsin. And I would like to assign the merit of our sharing here today, that they might succeed in being able to bring that awareness into a reality that will be good for all the people concerned. Amen. I think you had enough input. It's time for getting some food afterwards, but there are some announcements I understand that will be made. And so I will take my leave with Eve. And I'm very glad that I was able to make it today. I have been a little bit under the weather, and I'm delighted that we're here with you. And I want to wish also for Naropa to have the right budget, and the right wonderful culture, which at one time was what Rinpoche brought here for it, so that it might just work with us in our day as it worked in his day. Say amen to that.
Amen.